Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. One of the things I really like to do is to look at the Bible and consider some of the more obscure people whose lives intersect with God's story in surprising ways. They don't usually gather as much attention as some others. We know all about Peter and Paul, for example, or Moses and King David, and they all have significant portions of the Bible written about them. But there are others who may just get a few verses, and some of the stories are a little bit fun or funny, and yet when you think about them, they have something to say as well, and they are worth looking at. There are characters like this all over the Bible, but for this week, I'm going to look at some that we might find in the New Testament. I'm sure we'll get to some of the others later on in other weeks. Today, we want to look at two people whose stories are connected, but who often get lost in the star-filled wonder of Christmas. Jewish law indicated that newborn male children were to be presented to God at the temple in Jerusalem when they were 40 days old. In addition, the mother was required to offer 2 turtle doves as a sacrifice of purification at the same time. So that's what Mary and Joseph did with the baby Jesus. Now, as it happened, there was an old man there named Simeon. He must have been a faithful man because the Holy Spirit had promised him that he would lay eyes on the long-awaited Messiah before he died. But he was also by now an old man, and he knew his time was growing short. So every day, Simeon went to the temple, eagerly looking at all the children presented there, hungering to greet the Messiah. And when Mary and Joseph presented Jesus, somehow the Holy Spirit revealed to Simeon that Jesus was it. Imagine the light that came to Simeon's tired old eyes. Simeon took the child in his arms and prayed a prayer of praise that is called by a special name, the Nunc Dimittis, and we know it still today. Lord, now let your servant depart in peace. Your word has been fulfilled. My own eyes have seen the salvation which you have prepared in the sight of every people, a light to reveal you to the nations and the glory of your people Israel. And I think it's important for us to see Simeon's eager longing for God at work to save and redeem God's people. And maybe that should call us to just as eagerly look for it too. And it's important that Simeon knew right here at the beginning of the gospel that the message of the love and hope we have in God was meant for all nations. God's grace and love and salvation are for all people. And maybe sometimes we need to renew our commitment to that as well. And can't you just imagine how his arms tingled and his heart leapt to have the opportunity to hold in those old arms the very salvation of the world? Now, there is a dark moment in the story that hints of the more important dark moment ahead. Simeon looked at Mary and spoke of how Jesus would make a difference for many, some who would embrace him, and others who would oppose him. Then, by the Holy Spirit, Simeon added, "And a sword shall pierce your own soul too." These words foreshadow Jesus' death and Mary's grief. Simeon wasn't alone. There was also there in the temple a prophetess, Anna, who was also very old and who had dedicated her life to praising God. She was in the temple day and night at her prayer and praises. And the way the Bible reads, Simeon was still holding the baby Jesus when Anna came up and praised God and began to speak about the child to everyone around. So here was a second person who had been looking for what God was going to do to save God's people, and who saw it and who proclaimed it with joy. God's work of salvation had come. Maybe we should eagerly proclaim it too. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.